The Pocket 4P doesn't just have an extra lens compared to the Pocket 4. There are significantly more differences than you might think at first glance. For example, the Pocket 4P's wide-angle camera also features a completely new sensor, a so-called low-fix sensor for improved dynamic range. That's why today we're taking a close look at both cameras in a direct comparison. I'll explain all the differences in detail and we'll try to figure out whether the Pocket 4P is actually worth the extra cost. The Pocket 4P is finally globally available and was provided to me by DJI for testing purposes. But this video does not include any additional paid sponsorship, and everything I say is based on my own personal opinion. In total, there are 8 relevant differences between the Pocket 4 and the Pocket 4P. One difference that shouldn't be underestimated is, of course, the size, design and what's included in the box. The second lens naturally makes the Pocket 4P's camera unit and gimbal significantly larger than those of the Pocket 4. This makes the camera slightly longer overall and also 40 grams heavier. Although I have to be completely honest and say that I hardly noticed the weight difference during testing. Apart from that, the two cameras are absolutely identical on the outside. The same buttons, the same connectors on the gimbal head, the same handle. So at least on the outside, the Pocket 4P is simply a Pocket 4 with a second lens and a larger gimbal. But that leads to another difference. When you turn the camera off, the lenses on the Pocket 4P don't face inward. They face forward. And unlike with the Pocket 4, there's no gimbal clamp to protect the gimbal. Unfortunately, there is also no cover like the one for the Pocket 3. That's why you should store the camera securely in the included carrying pouch when transporting it to keep it protected. The Pocket 4P bundles also include more accessories. That's because the fill light is included in the standard combo only with the Pocket 4P, but not with the Pocket 4. The Pocket 4P so-called vlog combo doesn't include an ultra-wide lens and comes with the Mic Mini 2 instead of the Mic 3, but it does include the Osmo Frame Tab, which you can use as a remote. The Frame Tab is now also compatible with the Pocket 4. Of course, the most important difference between the two cameras lies in the Telephoto Lens. And the Telephoto Lens isn't just the main difference between the two cameras, it's also my absolute favorite feature of the Pocket 4P. While the main lens on both cameras has exactly the same focal length of 20mm, the Telephoto Lens has a focal length of 60mm. Due to its longer focal length, the Pocket 4P's Telephoto Lens produces significantly less distortion and is therefore much better suited for close-ups of faces and people. And that's an advantage that's often underestimated. Sure, you can simply get closer with a wide-angle lens, but the result won't be the same. And while that might be somewhat acceptable for shooting objects, the longer focal length is a decisive advantage, especially when taking close-ups of people. And as you can see, the Pocket 4P's telephoto lens takes very beautiful shots. But there are a couple of other things you should know about the two lenses or cameras. At 1/1.28 inches, the telephoto lens sensor is significantly smaller than the sensor of the main lens. And even though the telephoto lens has a slightly larger aperture at f1.8, it's therefore not quite as well suited for low light conditions. Nevertheless, the telephoto lens also takes perfectly usable and good shots in low light, as you can see here. The wide-angle main lens of the Pocket 4, not the Pocket 4P, features a lossless 2x zoom at 40mm. This means you can zoom in to 2x, and the camera simply uses a smaller portion of the high-resolution sensor. This is therefore not a purely digital crop, and the result is excellent. Interestingly, the wide-angle main lens of the Pocket 4P does not have this feature. It was likely assumed that you'd achieve better results at 3x anyway if needed. In contrast, the telephoto lens of the Pocket 4P features a 2x lossless zoom, corresponding to a zoom factor of 6x. This means that even at 6x or 120mm, you can still take very good shots with the Pocket 4P and benefit from the significant background compression. The telephoto lens has a minimum focusing distance of 20 cm, and especially at 6x, this allows you to capture interesting macro-like close-ups. This is another feature that the Pocket 4 doesn't have. Personally, I'm a big fan of the telephoto lens on the Pocket 4P, but it also has one major drawback. The telephoto lens doesn't support the new D-Log 2 lock mode, only D-Log. And D-Log and D-Log 2 are two completely different color profiles. Only D-Log 2 enables the incredible dynamic range of 17 stops. So if you want to take advantage of this new feature on the Pocket 4P, you'll have to stick to the wide-angle lens. And you may need to match shots taken in D-Log with the telephoto lens to those taken in D-Log 2 with the wide lens, which can be cumbersome. The reason for this limitation is clear. Only the wide-angle camera has the new low-fix sensor, which makes this incredible dynamic range possible in the first place. Since the Pocket 4P's wide-angle camera also has a new sensor, this raises the question of whether there are any differences in image quality compared to the Pocket 4, Even when using the standard color profile, I took a large number of comparison shots. And I can say that the shots taken by both cameras with the wide-angle main lens in the standard color profile look nearly identical. Yes, there are minor differences in color from time to time, but to be honest, you wouldn't be able to clearly tell the two shots apart. Incidentally, the same applies to the dynamic range. The dynamic range of both cameras using the default settings is also nearly identical, and that's despite the Pocket 4P's new low-fix sensor, which was supposed to deliver a significantly improved dynamic range. But in my opinion, the reason for this is easy to understand. I am convinced that when using auto exposure with the standard color profile, a certain degree of HDR processing takes place in the background. You can tell this when you compare the results with manual exposure settings. The auto exposure mode results in a noticeably better dynamic range. The shots taken with the standard color profile and auto exposure are thus the result of fairly heavy processing. The sensor's raw dynamic range then plays only a minor role. But there is one small surprise. In low light, and especially when it's very dark, the Pocket 4P has slight advantages. The colors are slightly better, the Pocket 4P's shots have a bit more detail, and there is also visibly less image noise, even though they're actually a bit brighter. This difference is only clearly visible when it's very dark, as it is here. Still, it's a surprising result. Incidentally, despite its smaller sensor, the 3x telephoto lens produces surprisingly good shots in low light. That's a very pleasant surprise for me. This shot of the palm tree is incredible, because what you can see here, it was extremely dark, much darker than it appears in this shot. Despite the slight differences in low-light performance, the truly significant differences in image quality between the two cameras only become apparent when we use the log color profiles. Unlike the Pocket 4, the Pocket 4P features not just one log profile, but two, D-Log and D-Log 2. And only D-Log 2 on the Pocket 4P enables the incredible dynamic range of 17 stops. 17 stops. That's on par with a high-end professional cinema camera and is an incredible figure for a consumer camera. But as is often the case with professional equipment, it takes some time to get used to it in order to actually achieve outstanding results. And that applies not only to D-Log 2, but also to D-Log, which is already significantly flatter than the more consumer-friendly D-Log M on the Pocket 3. DJI offers LUTs that, with a single click, convert log footage into footage with contrast and saturation. I've taken a few comparison shots here. These shots were taken using auto exposure and then converted using DJI's LUTs. This works well sometimes, and less well at other times. In some cases, the footage is underexposed or overexposed. In those cases, additional correction is necessary. Interestingly, the results using auto mode and the simple conversion LUT with D-Log 2 on the Pocket 4P were generally better than with standard D-Log, and also better than on the Pocket 4. I also prefer the colors of the shots taken with D-Log 2. But for truly optimal results, especially when it comes to exposure, you should set the exposure of the log recordings manually, which is much easier in a controlled environment. Here in the office by the window, you can see that in these cases, D-Log 2 actually allows you to achieve very good results with a significantly higher dynamic range than with D-Log. D-Log 2 can therefore be an extremely useful feature. However, to get good results, you'll need some time to get used to it and a bit of practice with color grading. But D-Log 2 isn't the only additional color profile the Pocket 4P offers compared to the Pocket 4. Unlike the Pocket 4, the Pocket 4P also features an HDR color profile. HDR is sometimes misunderstood in this context. HDR in this context refers more to a display technology than a recording technology. With HDR, highlights in particular are displayed much brighter than with a standard color profile. This results in significantly higher contrast and a very realistic image. But to benefit from this, the display on which the image is shown must be HDR capable, such as the screen of a modern smartphone or TV. Only then can you actually see the difference. This means that if you frequently view your recordings on your smartphone, for example, HDR is a relevant advantage. And it's surprising that the Pocket 4 doesn't have an HDR profile, since even the Pocket 3 had one. But I'm optimistic that HDR will still be added to the Pocket 4 via an update. By the way, since the last firmware update, the Pocket 4 also supports the Osmo frame tab and can therefore be controlled remotely. However, the frame tab, at least for now, isn't available separately as an accessory, but only as part of a bundle with the Pocket 4P or the Osmo Mobile 8P. But that could still change. In any case, the frame tab support is no longer a decisive advantage of the Pocket 4P. I mentioned at the beginning that the Pocket 4P's gimbal is visibly larger due to the second lens. And of course, it also has to stabilize a heavier load. In terms of stabilization performance alone, however, I don't see any significant differences between the two cameras. The same applies to subject tracking. Both cameras have the same strengths and weaknesses. They're extremely fast and efficient at tracking a subject. But once they lose track of the subject, they interrupt tracking relatively quickly. Interestingly, there is a difference in the range of motion. While the Pocket 4P has the same limitations on the pan axis as the Pocket 4 and reaches its limit very quickly, especially to the left, it has a slightly greater range of motion on the tilt axis. This means the camera can be tilted slightly further up and down. In practice, however, this will make a relevant difference for very few users. Apart from that, the Pocket 4P has nearly identical features to the Pocket 4. It has the same recording modes, the same frame rate settings, the same tracking features, and the same settings options. Aside from the differences we've already seen, there are only 2 additional features available exclusively on the Pocket 4P. The Pocket 4P supports multi-person tracking, meaning it can track and keep up to 8 people in the frame. And only the Pocket 4P currently features auto media transfer, which transfers recording files directly to your smartphone after you turn off the camera. Not to the cloud, but to your smartphone. That's the current status as of late July, and I strongly expect that both features will also be made available on the Pocket 4 via an update. But there's another very important difference between the two cameras: recording time. And in this regard, the Pocket 4 is the better choice. The larger camera unit and the new sensor seem to consume more power. The Pocket 4P gets noticeably warmer during recording than the Pocket 4. And that's not all. With 3 hours and 25 minutes in 4K 30, the Pocket 4 can also record for more than 40 minutes longer than the Pocket 4P. It's worth noting, however, that the Pocket 4P can also shoot for a very long time, 2 hours and 42 minutes. And I don't think this difference should be the deciding factor when choosing between the two cameras. What is definitely a deciding factor though is the price. So how much do the two cameras cost? And does the extra cost justify buying the Pocket 4P? The Pocket 4 costs 500 euros in Europe. Interestingly, the Creator Combo is currently also available in the US, albeit only on Amazon. There, it costs from $800. The Pocket 4P costs 100 euros more than the Pocket 4 in Europe, bringing the price of the standard bundle to 600 euros, but it is not currently available in the US. You'll find all the links to both cameras in the video description below. As we've seen today, the most important differences between the two cameras are the second lens, the new sensor, and the new log profile. Personally, I make videos about consumer cameras, so I tend to think more like a consumer than a professional filmmaker. The log 2 wouldn't be a deciding factor for me personally. The second lens, however, definitely is. Having only a 20mm lens on a camera is very limiting. Close-ups of faces in particular are only possible with significant distortion. For this reason alone, I'd recommend the Pocket 4P to most people if you can afford the extra cost. The additional lens simply gives you significantly more options, and in my opinion, the size and weight don't play such a decisive role in practice. But of course, both are excellent cameras with very nice image quality. So what do you think? What's your personal opinion on the topic? Give me a like as feedback if you found this video interesting. A detailed tutorial on the Pocket 4P will follow soon, so stay tuned and see you next time.